Hey guys, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. I'm finally back for some more videos, and the delay was because I was looking for replays to help me do the next section of my videos. But as we can see on the screen, we're going to be learning about PvZ scouting today. And just a little note there, I'm saying that some of the scouting information is not present in these replays, just because I'm going to go over the general gist of what you want to look out for. It's not necessarily what we're going to see, but it's definitely things you need to be thinking about in your own games. So basically, the whole idea of scouting is the idea that you need to go in and figure out what your opponent is doing and figure out how you're supposed to counter that. And there's different timings that things are going to be present, and we'll kind of run you through those as well. So let's just go ahead and jump into the game here and get us started. So we're going to be taking a look at first is actually Grubby against TLO. This is from WCS Europe. I believe it's round of 32, Group F, if I'm not mistaken. And I would know because I've been looking through basically every replay from every WCS set. And I'm going to fast forward here just a little bit. We're not going to watch all this in real time. My mouse is like really freaking out. But so what we're going to see here is the first thing you want to do in PvZ. You're going to make a pylon somewhere near an area that you're going to wall off. So if you're going to be gateway expanding, it'll be at your main ramp. This will be the same on this map for both because it's a tiny ramp and your base is in the back usually. So that's what the reasoning is behind him doing this here. But this is actually going to be for Forge Expand. We're going to kind of go over some stuff for Forge Expand here. So what Grubby's going to do is he's going to go scout and try to figure out where TLO has spawned. And sometimes, I should mention it, that he doesn't do it in this replay, but I do it in my own games just to be extra safe. And that is, when I make my Forge, I send out a second scout if I haven't found them yet, just to be sure there's nothing funny going on if I'm on a 4-player map. So Grubby's going to come up here. He's not going to see TLO quite yet, which we can see if we want to look at this. This is where TLO actually is. Grubby's just scouting to this location first. So I would personally, if you get up here and you don't see anything quite yet on a 4-player map, just go send out a second scout over to this area so that at minimum you will scout him second one way or another. So Grubby's going to do something a little different though. He's just going to take a risk and he's going to go Nexus first. The big problem here is that if TLO were to open with something like a 6 pool, which somebody like Sulky does a lot, and then just attack with Zerglings, then Grubby would basically be dead. So this is one of those builds where scouting almost doesn't matter very much, but he is following up with a Forge here. And the reasoning I'm keeping behind going with the Forge Expand scouting is there's different things you need to scout for on Forge Expand versus a Gateway Expand. So what Grubby's going to do here is he's going to try to block the third base of TLO for as long as possible, because the deal with Forge Expands is that if they have a third base and if they're not mining gas, then you're free to basically do whatever you want. So he's going to verify that the drone wants to fight for this third base, and then once he takes it, he can be like, okay, cool, there's no reason to overreact here. But if you're facing a 2-base Zerg and you opened up Forge, which we're seeing here, and they don't have a third base by about 4 minutes or so, or if you see them mining gas before they take a third base, then that's a big tell that they're going to be aggressive really soon, and you need to prioritize things like sentries, maybe an extra cannon. You most specifically need to figure out what that gas is being spent on, because it's going to be either Roach or Baneling, and you need to figure out which one it is so you can react appropriately. So TLO is going to come down here, start fighting for this expansion. One unusual thing that TLO does is he does take this gas, but Grubby doesn't see. So the lack of Grubby knowing this is going to be a big problem, or at least it could be. But I think this is honestly just going to be for a faster Zergling speed and not for anything terribly aggressive. So I'm going to switch back onto just Grubby's vision here, so we kind of get the authentic experience of scouting everything. So this probe is going to die. There's no reason for Grubby to try to get out of here with it because it's already dead. If he were to see the gas, maybe he would change his build a little bit and maybe get a sentry before adding any extra tech and be extra safe that way. So we'll just have to see. And of course, we can see the production tab over here, so maybe I'll just turn that off. No, I'll keep it up. But the whole idea here is just to kind of simulate what it would look like from your own perspective if you're playing Protoss. So far, core is coming down on right after the gateway, which is, of course, very common. And the scouting that you need to reaffirm, this is a good time any time after core. If you don't know the status of the third base, or if you don't know the status of gas mining, then just send out another worker and try to figure out what's going on, because that'll usually give you a lot of really good information, especially if they're rushing something like Zerglings and they're setting up for a bathing all-in or something. Or if you can see roaches out, that's a big tell to be like, oh crap, I need to put a sentry out, and I need to put up extra cannons or else I'm going to die. So this timing right after your core drops is a really good time to go back out and figure out what's going on. Grubby doesn't do that because he's reasonably confident enough against TLO that he's not going to do anything crazy like that. So he's just going to go ahead and proceed as normal. And then the most important thing is right after your core finishes up is what are you going to spend your gas on? Some people will spend it on a mothership core, some people will spend it on a sentry, but going Stargate immediately afterward is the ultimate sign of saying, I know I'm safe for quite a while, so I don't care about what the opponent is doing for the time being because I know that I can be safe behind maybe a Void Ray or an Oracle or whatever I decide to put out first. So that's what he does. TLO unfortunately scouts that, so you want to do a little bit better job of keeping that blocked off. Now this is another interesting little thing that Grubby is doing. He's actually sending out a follow-up scout here. He's not sending a pro, but rather sending a zealot, because if TLO decided to not make any extra Zerglings, then this zealot is going to tell him everything that he wants to know. So the zealot's going to walk up here. There's a stalker rallying toward it, just in case a lot of Zerglings come out. The stalker can kite those for quite a while, assuming the Zergling speed won't be done, but we know that it will be done soon. So he comes up here, he's going to check for gas mining, he's going to check for the drone count over here. So he comes up, and he sees that there's a lot of drones here, the Queen being down here as well is a big tell that there's nothing aggressive going on here from TLO. And the fact that there's nothing waiting to kill this zealot right away means that TLO doesn't have a ton of units, and a lot of times you can just walk home with this because you're going to be forcing out extra units anyway. So you can see the zealot's basically done its job already, and like we were talking about, the stalker following up can do well against small numbers of Zerglings. Now the Phoenix is out, so the Phoenix is going to try and figure out what's going on as well. And you can start off with a lot of Phoenix if you want to. That's a good way to get continued scouting over and over. And most of the time in PvZ, especially off of Forge Expand, you're going to go for something like 4 or 5 Phoenix and just continually harass them, fly around his base, kill workers, kill stray overlords, queens maybe if you can, and figure out what's going on while you transition into something else. And that something else is almost always Robo and Colossus. So we're going to keep going here. Somebody random left the game. So he's adding a few gateways, which is also very normal, and as soon as he has the money, I think he's going to add a Robo. I haven't actually seen all this replay yet. Just saw the opening to make sure that it actually made sense. And the Stalker getting killed out here, that's something you want to watch out for, but that's not very, relevant in this case. So the Phoenix are basically flying around trying to find Overlords, and I'm sorry if this is a little disorienting. This is a new mouse that I'm observing with, and it's a little faster than I'm used to, so either way. Okay, the next little stage of what you want to figure out, at least with these first few Phoenix, or maybe a hallucination or something, you want to figure out when the lair is coming down. If the lair is done super early, then you really want to start looking out for things like super fast Spire, maybe a really fast Hydralisk timing or something. It's just getting more and more common. So you need to be mindful of things like that. But the Phoenix is going to fly in here, and it's going to see that the lair is on the way. This is pretty normal timing for right now. And again, all these little signals that you're looking out for, make sure and look down at the clock so you know what time you should be looking for those in your own games. So the Phoenix still just scouting around. He sees a lot of drones here. The gas mining hasn't quite started yet, so he knows that there can't be a ton of gas already mined on this geyser because that's not even done. That will kind of sway him away from really gas-intensive things like infestors, maybe swarm hosts, mutas, stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of rule out based upon what you know. So more Phoenix coming down here. He's just securing a third base. Nothing too crazy. Phoenix still continually trying to finish up scouting when this lair is done. So you definitely want to hang out with them for quite a while. And the adding of another Spore here is kind of indicative that he's not going for something super air intensive. This almost smells like something like an Ultra build maybe, with the double Ling upgrades or something. So you definitely want to look out for stuff like that as well if you can find it. But the Phoenix are just going to continue to scout here. And as we can see on the production tab, there's an infestation pit. And that's not something that's really necessary to get on top of right away, especially if you're already making Colossus, which we can see the Colossus Bay is on the way. So Grubby's in a good position here. Now just to kind of run down the rest of the stuff that you need to scout for, this is basically the point where we've entered the mid-game. We've entered the point where the Zerg has chosen their starting tech, and from that point on you need to start thinking what their transitions could be. So if you scout this infestation pit this early, which we can't see, it's right here, You got to think it's something like Swarm Host, because infestors aren't terribly common. But if you can scout this initial tech, say it's something like Hydra, for example, and you're making a lot of Colossus to counter the Hydralisks, then you have to think, okay, well, if I was Zerg and they were making a lot of Colossus, what would I do to try and counter that? So a lot of people will show maybe 10 or 12 Hydralisks and be like, yeah, I'm going for Hydra, but in reality, they're actually building a Spire somewhere and they're switching into Mutalisks. So by this stage of the game, maybe about 10 minutes and beyond, you need to have reasonable answers for pretty much every extreme sort of tech that comes out, whether that's Mutalisk, Hydra, Swarm Host, whatever. So let's say we're opening up Colossus like we're doing right now, and then you continually scout, maybe with hallucinations, maybe with your Phoenix are out, and then you see a Spire coming up. You can think, okay, well, is that for Mutalisks or is that for something else? And just to be safe, you want to research stuff like Blink. You want to start maybe adding extra Stargates. A lot of people like the 2 Stargate and Colossus production so that they can switch into Phoenixes if they need to. So you need to be mindful of all those different little transitions that can happen throughout the stage of the game. But from this point on, there's not a whole lot more you need to be actively scouting for, except for maybe extra bases, and just looking out for what his unit composition is so you can react to it appropriately, because the reactions to Mutalisks are totally different than the reactions to, say, something like Ultralisks. So we won't watch the rest of this game because it's not totally necessary. I do want to kind of get into more of the information you're going to need to garner from opening a gateway expand, and I have so many replays here. These are all the replays that I've reviewed. Maybe this will just be faster to go in here and find it this way. Mouse is totally derping out. So this time we're going to be watching Showtime, and he's a European Protoss against a LZ, which is again a European Zerg. So we'll watch it from his perspective, and I want to show you guys the different little things you want to look out for, especially on gateway expands. So we saw Forge expands. Typically with Forge expands, Zergs are going to take a lot faster third base. They're going to be much more free about it because the pressures are going to come out later from the Protoss. But gateway expands are a lot different because you're going to open up with a gateway, maybe some gateway units, and part of your build needs to be built in to kind of attack them if they're being too greedy. So that's the whole deal here. Let me just turn on the Protoss's vision so we can kind of play from their perspective. I don't want to have the stuff that he's selecting because that'll just make us sick. So Pylon coming down here at the ramp. Gateway on 13 is usually what you're going to see, so we'll see that come up here in just a second. And I guess as soon as we get there, let me just fast forward a little faster. So there's the gateway, rather than a forge or anything like that is what we're seeing. If it were Forge Expand, you want to start with your Pylon down here anyway, so that's a pretty large difference. Man, my mouse is really going crazy. Sorry about that. So, hatchery coming down here, this is definitely what you want to scout. And he did send a scout out right after the gateway, which is what we should note as well. This scout is basically just to affirm that there's no early pool on the way, and if you see a hatchery by the time you get there, then the pool can't be early enough to where you need to start panicking and making zealots and stuff like that to try and not die. So most of the time, you're going to come in here, you're going to try and see if they put a pool down yet. This was obviously hatch first with the speed that's on there, because the hatchery is further along than the pool. The only way that can possibly happen is if they went hatch first, so that's one little interesting note. Then you also want to make sure they're not mining too much gas right away. If they are, this could be some type of really fast Zergling speed all-in or Baneling all-in or something like that that you need to look out for. And then try to get your Nexus down, which is what everybody does. Especially in this circumstance, because the pool's so late, you can just basically take a Nexus with no units. And your Mothership Core and Zealot and stuff will be out in time by the time you finish your wall before any Zerglings will get to your base. So these are more so intricacies of openers, which we've kind of talked about before, but I thought it'd be good to review it here in the scouting video. So again, the next thing you want to look out for is once you've hung out in their base for a little while, make sure there's no super early gas mining or anything. Then you want to go over and check for a third base, because if they take a third right away, your reaction basically has to be to go attack them if you open Gateway Expand. If they just take a third and you don't punish it at all, then they're going to get way ahead because their hatcheries are faster, you're not doing anything to control the tempo of their larvae. The biggest thing with Gateway Expand is that your Warp Gate is going to be done way faster than on a Forge Expand, by about a minute, I'd say. So you really need to be on top of what the Zerg is doing so you can utilize that Warp Gate if you need to. So some people will actually just do it blindly in their openers anyway, and that's not a terrible choice, assuming you don't lose units if they have a lot of stuff. So you need to be mindful of things like that on a Gateway Expand opener. So the next stages are basically just continuing to check up on that third base and see if it's coming down. This is just like in the Forge Expand video, or rather in the Forge Expand replay that we just watched. If they don't have a third base for a really long time and they're mining a lot of gas, then there's no reason for you to get out on the map and try and kill them. You basically should just stay home and try to not die for a little while, because they're going to be the aggressor rather than the defender. And that's purely based on their third base and what they're spending gas on if they're still mining it. So you don't know any of that for a little while. I have seen some players kind of mix it up, especially people like Puck that will just send their Mothership Core out and figure out what's going on. Because if the Mothership Core gets in trouble, you can always just recall it. So that's another good scout that you can utilize. The other part of this is that you definitely do want to wall off as soon as possible, just in case they are making a lot of Zerglings or something, so that you can fend stuff like that off. The 2 Zealots behind this as well is really standard. And then the Stargate is going to be this continual scouting throughout the game. I'd really like to see a probe come out, or yeah, I was going to say either that or a Zealot come out to try and figure out what's going on. So this is kind of the same follow-up scout that Grubby did, where you just kind of send out a first couple of units, and this time he's bringing his core so that if it gets in trouble, he can just recall it. So he wants to figure out if a third's here, and he does see a third finally, so this is okay. Pressuring this is not totally necessary, at least with Warpins and stuff. You can try to be irritating with these little bits of units. And the other good thing about doing stuff like this is it does force him to produce extra units when he wouldn't want to. So there are no pylons on the map, so we're not going to see any sort of super aggressive follow-up here. And again, if you get in trouble, you can't recall. So just handling that perfectly. Now the Oracle's coming out here, so the next stage of scouting can begin. You can start to wonder, at this time in the game, again, watch the clock. You can start to wonder when's his lair starting, and what tech is he going to be getting off of that lair. Things like Roach Warrens and stuff don't matter at this stage, because Zergs will just blindly get them anyway, since they probably should. Since oftentimes they won't be able to figure out what the Protoss is doing, so the only thing that really matters is the lair and what tech comes off of that layer. So you kind of need to know all the different things that are possible at that point. So Oracle's coming in here. He sees a ton of drones right now, so there's not any big spending on a lot of units. If you see this many drones, especially transferring over to a third base, then you know that they're just doing nothing but droning for quite a while. And right on time, my phone starts chirping and being annoying right in the middle of a video, which seems to happen every time I record. So again, the first Stargate unit can figure out a lot. This could be a Phoenix if you wanted to, but this time he opts for Oracle. And the Revelation that you can use on the Oracle can be really valuable as the game goes on. Now this is something really weird that he's seeing. This is a Baneling nest, and 3-base Baneling is not really a thing. So this may just be an anticipation of something weird that Showtime does typically on the ladder. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to that. That's not really something that should concern us. He sees the lair just starting as well, and again, starting the lair at 9 minutes, you can time this out. So let's check this out. You need to know the timings on here. Let's say you just saw the lair start. 80 seconds is how long it takes to finish. So in 80 seconds, you should be doing some follow-up scouts to figure out what the lair tech is that's coming down. If I remember this game right, this is actually an Ultralisk build, which comes up on Hive, and I want to mention how it looks here really quickly, because this is kind of a long game, and I don't want to spend too long on this, but if you're looking at a game where you're trying to figure out what's going on because you can't see any gas spending, one thing you can do is just get out there and just put on some pressure and see what units come to attack you. But secondarily, if you see a ton of Zerglings like this, if you see double Evo, which this should be around here somewhere, oh duh, right there, and if you see them rushing to Hive and they have a lot of queens, then that's definitely going to indicate Ultras. You need to kind of piece all this stuff together and be like, if I was going for X unit composition, what signs would it show? So the signs that you're showing is double melee upgrades, maybe Baneling Nest to kind of carry over into that point, a really fast Infestation Pit after a lair, and a really fast Hive are all signs of Ultras, especially if they start getting a lot of queens. So you need to be able to kind of learn the race that you're playing against and start to be able to piece together the information that you need to know. So basically, we know the scout timings. We've been through all this stuff. You can go back and re-watch this and kind of compare them to your own games to see when people are doing weird stuff as well, or stuff that you might need to scout and adjust that way. But this is how it's done at the highest levels, and it should be able to trickle all the way down to any level that you're playing at. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will be posting more scouting videos for the other two races, including Protoss, so PvT and PvP in the near future, as soon as I get enough replays for all of them. But in the meantime, I guess I'll check you later.